Jimmy USO just ambushed Drew McIntyre backstage in the most vicious assault in SmackDown history, and WWE did nothing to stop it. I am absolutely disgusted and furious right now because what Jimmy USO just did to Drew McIntyre backstage on Friday Night SmackDown is the most cowardly, brutal, and premeditated attack I have ever witnessed in professional wrestling. Jimmy USO didn't just attack Drew McIntyre, he hunted him down backstage like a predator stalking prey, waited until Drew was completely vulnerable and alone, and then unleashed a vicious assault that left Drew bloodied, unconscious, and possibly seriously injured. And what makes me absolutely enraged is that WWE security did nothing to prevent this attack, even though everyone backstage knew Jimmy was looking for Drew. And here's what's making me absolutely livid: this wasn't a heat-of-the-moment confrontation. This wasn't two wrestlers bumping into each other and tensions boiling over. This was a calculated, premeditated assault where Jimmy USO tracked Drew McIntyre's movements backstage, waited for the perfect moment when Drew was isolated and defenseless, and then attacked him with weapons and furniture in what can only be described as attempted murder on live television. Where was WWE security? Where were the producers? Where were Drew's friends? Why did nobody stop this attack before it went as far as it did? But I need to know from you right now, are you as outraged as I am that Jimmy was allowed to hunt down and brutally assault Drew backstage without any intervention, or do you think this is just part of the show and Drew should have been more careful? Should Jimmy USO face legal consequences for what he did, not just WWE consequences? Should Drew be medically cleared to compete after such a vicious attack, or should WWE protect him by pulling him from upcoming matches? Tell me right now in the comments, because what I'm about to reveal about exactly what Jimmy did to Drew, the weapons he used, the specific injuries Drew sustained, and the shocking reason why WWE security deliberately stayed away from this assault is going to make you question whether WWE cares at all about wrestler safety. Let me take you through this entire nightmare scenario from the beginning, because understanding how methodically Jimmy USO planned this attack makes it so much more disturbing and sinister. SmackDown opened with Drew McIntyre arriving at the arena looking focused and determined. Drew was scheduled for a segment later in the show where he would address his upcoming WWE Championship match against Cody Rhodes. Drew seemed completely unaware that he was walking into a trap. About 30 minutes into SmackDown, cameras caught Jimmy USO entering the arena through a side entrance. What was immediately noticeable and concerning was Jimmy's demeanor. He wasn't walking normally, he was moving with purpose and intensity, looking around like he was searching for something or someone. A backstage interviewer approached Jimmy and tried to ask him questions. "Jimmy, can you tell us what your plans are for tonight?" Jimmy didn't even look at the interviewer. He just brushed past them and kept walking, his eyes scanning every hallway and every room. Jimmy was hunting. Quick question: have you ever been in a situation where you knew someone was looking for you with bad intentions? How did you handle it? Tell me in the comments. Cameras followed Jimmy as he walked through the backstage area, asking various WWE personnel, "Where's Drew McIntyre? Have you seen Drew? Which locker room is Drew using?" Most people gave vague answers or claimed they didn't know, clearly uncomfortable with Jimmy's aggressive questioning. But Jimmy was persistent, checking room after room, hallway after hallway, determined to find Drew. This went on for nearly 20 minutes of real time. WWE cameras were documenting Jimmy's search, which means WWE knew what was about to happen and did nothing to warn Drew or increase security. That's the part that makes me furious. This attack was preventable. While Jimmy was hunting Drew, cameras also showed Drew McIntyre in the trainer's room getting his knee wrapped for precautionary reasons. Drew had been dealing with a minor knee issue and was being treated by WWE's medical staff. This is crucial information. Drew was in the trainer's room, a place where wrestlers are supposed to be safe and protected. Drew was receiving medical treatment and was therefore vulnerable. He couldn't defend himself properly with medical staff working on his leg. Someone, and WWE still hasn't revealed who, told Jimmy USO that Drew was in the trainer's room. Whether this person innocently answered Jimmy's question or deliberately set Drew up for the attack, we don't know. But once Jimmy knew Drew's location, his body language changed. Jimmy's walk became more aggressive. His fists clenched. His jaw tightened. This was a man who had found his target and was about to strike. Cameras captured Jimmy approaching the trainer's room door. Jimmy paused outside for just a moment, taking a deep breath like he was preparing himself for what he was about to do. And then Jimmy burst through the door. Do you think the person who told Jimmy where Drew was should face consequences? Or were they just innocently answering a question? Tell me. The moment Jimmy burst into the trainer's room, chaos erupted. The medical staff immediately jumped back, shocked by Jimmy's aggressive entrance. Drew tried to stand up from the training table, but remember, his knee was being worked on and he couldn't move quickly. That split second of vulnerability was all Jimmy needed. Jimmy immediately charged at Drew and hit him with a vicious superkick before Drew could even fully defend himself. The sound of the impact echoed through the trainer's room. Drew's head snapped back and he fell against the training table. But Jimmy didn't stop there. This is where the attack went from a wrestling altercation to something genuinely disturbing. Jimmy grabbed Drew and threw him into the medical equipment, sending metal trays and instruments crashing to the floor. Drew tried to fight back, throwing punches at Jimmy, but Drew was disoriented from the initial superkick and couldn't mount an effective defense. The medical staff was screaming for security. "Someone call security. We need help in here now." But security didn't come. Not immediately. And that delay allowed Jimmy to continue his assault uninterrupted for several more minutes. Have you ever witnessed violence where people were calling for help but help didn't arrive in time? That helpless feeling is terrifying. Tell me about it. Jimmy continued attacking Drew, hitting him with forearms, kicks, and strikes. Drew's face was already starting to swell and blood was beginning to flow from a cut above Drew's eye, whether from the superkick or from being thrown into the equipment, we couldn't tell. Drew tried to escape the trainer's room, stumbling toward the door, but Jimmy grabbed him from behind and slammed Drew's face into the doorframe. The sound was sickening. Drew crumpled to the floor, blood now clearly visible on his face. Here's where this attack escalated from bad to horrifying. Jimmy USO started using weapons. Jimmy grabbed a steel chair that was in the hallway outside the trainer's room. This wasn't a wrestling chair brought to ringside for a match, this was a legitimate chair that staff members use for sitting. It was heavier and more dangerous than typical wrestling chairs. Jimmy brought the chair into the trainer's room where Drew was trying to get to his feet. Drew saw the chair and his eyes widened with genuine fear. Drew tried to defend himself, but Jimmy swung the chair and cracked Drew across the back. Drew screamed in pain and fell forward. The medical staff was still in the room, pressed against the walls, terrified and unable to help. But Jimmy still wasn't done. Jimmy hit Drew with the chair 2 more times, once across the back again and once across Drew's already injured knee. That shot to the knee was particularly cruel and calculated. Jimmy was targeting Drew's existing injury, trying to make it worse. This wasn't just about hurting Drew in the moment, this was about causing long-term damage that would affect Drew's ability to compete in his WWE Championship match. If someone targeted your existing injury to make it worse, how would you feel? That's not just aggression, that's cruelty. Tell me your thoughts. After the chair shots, Drew was barely moving. He was conscious but clearly hurt badly. Blood was flowing freely from the cut on his face. His back was welted and bruised. His knee was in obvious pain. Any reasonable person would think the attack would stop here. Drew was clearly defeated. He posed no threat. But Jimmy USO wasn't done yet. Jimmy grabbed Drew and started dragging him out of the trainer's room and into the hallway. The medical staff tried to intervene, but Jimmy shoved them aside. This man was possessed with rage and violence. Once in the hallway, Jimmy's assault on Drew became even more public and more brutal. Other wrestlers and backstage personnel were now witnessing what was happening, and their reactions were captured on camera. Some wrestlers looked shocked and disturbed. Others looked like they wanted to intervene but were hesitant. A few actually tried to approach and stop the attack, but Jimmy would turn toward them aggressively and they would back off. Why did nobody actually stop Jimmy? Why did grown men and trained fighters just watch as Jimmy destroyed Drew? This is one of the most frustrating aspects of this entire situation. Jimmy threw Drew against the concrete wall of the backstage area. Drew's body slammed against the hard surface and he slumped to the floor, barely conscious. Jimmy grabbed a nearby equipment case, one of those heavy rolling cases that WWE uses to transport gear, and he pushed it into Drew, crushing Drew between the case and the wall. Drew was coughing and gasping, clearly having the wind knocked out of him. This was no longer wrestling, this was assault. This was attempted murder on live television. Several wrestlers finally stepped forward to try to stop Jimmy, but it was too late, the damage was already done. Drew was destroyed. Would you have stepped in to stop this attack, or would you have been afraid of becoming Jimmy's next target? Be honest. Security finally arrived approximately 5 minutes after the attack began. 5 minutes. Do you know how long 5 minutes is when someone is being brutally assaulted? Where were they? Why did it take so long? These are questions that WWE needs to answer. When security arrived, they immediately surrounded Jimmy and pulled him away from Drew. Jimmy didn't resist, he'd accomplished what he came to do. Jimmy looked at the security personnel and said, "Captured on camera microphones, I'm done. I got what I came for." That statement is chilling. It confirms this attack was premeditated. Jimmy came to SmackDown with the specific intention of destroying Drew McIntyre, and he succeeded. Security escorted Jimmy away while medical personnel rushed to Drew's aid. Drew was lying on the concrete floor, bloodied and battered, barely responsive to medical staff's questions. The head trainer was checking Drew's vitals and calling for a stretcher. "We need to get him to a medical facility now. He might have a concussion, possible broken ribs. That knee injury is definitely aggravated." Hearing medical professionals list Drew's injuries in real time was disturbing. This wasn't just a wrestling storyline, Drew was genuinely hurt. Medical staff brought a stretcher and carefully lifted Drew onto it. The sight of Drew McIntyre, this massive, powerful wrestler who's known for his toughness, being loaded onto a stretcher was heartbreaking. Drew was conscious but clearly in tremendous pain. Blood was still flowing from his facial cut. His knee was swelling visibly. His back was covered in welts from the chair shots. As medical staff wheeled Drew toward the ambulance bay, cameras captured other wrestlers watching with genuine concern. Some were shaking their heads in disbelief. Others were visibly upset about what had happened to their colleague. Cody Rhodes, Drew's upcoming opponent for the WWE Championship, was shown watching on a backstage monitor. Cody's expression showed concern and possibly guilt. Even though Cody had nothing to do with the attack, he's in a position where he benefits from Drew being injured. Have you ever been in a situation where someone else's misfortune benefited you even though you didn't cause it? That guilt is real. Tell me about it. The stretcher scene was shot and edited to maximize the drama and the sense of genuine danger. This wasn't presented as just another wrestling angle, this was presented as a serious incident that endangered Drew's health and career. After Drew was taken away in the ambulance, WWE backstage interviewers started getting reactions from various people involved in or witnessing the attack. The head trainer who was treating Drew when Jimmy attacked spoke first. I've been a trainer in WWE for 15 years. I've seen a lot of attacks and a lot of violence. But what Jimmy USO did tonight crossed every line. Drew was receiving medical treatment. He was vulnerable. He couldn't defend himself properly. And Jimmy took advantage of that to inflict maximum damage. This is the kind of thing that could end a career. Those words, "end a career," sent chills through everyone watching. Was Drew's career actually in jeopardy from this attack? Several wrestlers who witnessed the hallway portion of the attack were interviewed. One wrestler said, "I wanted to stop it. I really did. But Jimmy looked possessed. I've never seen him like that. I was genuinely afraid that if I got involved, I'd be next." Another added, "This is exactly why we need better security protocols. 5 minutes is way too long for security to respond to something like this. What if Jimmy had a weapon? What if Drew had been hurt even worse? Do you think the wrestlers who didn't intervene are cowards, or were they reasonably concerned for their own safety? Tell me your take." SmackDown general manager Nick Aldis was also interviewed and his response was inadequate. "We're investigating what happened tonight. Jimmy USO will face consequences for his actions. Drew McIntyre is receiving medical treatment and will have updates on his condition as soon as possible." That's it. That's the response. "We're investigating." What's there to investigate? We all watched Jimmy hunt down and brutally assault Drew. The investigation should take about 5 seconds. About an hour after Drew was taken away, WWE released a medical update that was concerning. Drew McIntyre has been transported to a local medical facility for evaluation. Preliminary examination reveals laceration above the left eye requiring stitches, possible concussion, aggravated knee injury, multiple contusions to the back and ribs. Drew is currently undergoing further testing and will remain under medical observation. That's a lot of injuries from a single attack. And the possible concussion is particularly concerning because concussions can have long-term effects and require extended recovery time. The medical update didn't specify when or if Drew would be cleared to compete in his WWE Championship match against Cody Rhodes. That uncertainty became a major storyline point. Wrestling fans immediately started speculating on social media. Is Drew going to be medically cleared in time for his title match? What if Drew can't compete? Does Cody get a different opponent? Could this attack actually cost Drew his championship opportunity? These were all legitimate questions that WWE needed to address, but they were leaving things intentionally vague to build suspense. Later in the SmackDown broadcast, cameras found Jimmy USO backstage. Jimmy had changed out of his attack clothes and looked calmer, though still intense. A backstage interviewer cautiously approached Jimmy and asked, "Jimmy, why did you attack Drew McIntyre? What's your explanation for what you did tonight?" Jimmy stared directly into the camera with cold, calculating eyes and delivered a promo that was chilling in its honesty. "You want to know why I attacked Drew? Because I could. Because Drew represents everything that's wrong with this business. Drew thinks he's entitled to a WWE Championship match. Drew thinks he deserves opportunities just because he's tall and Scottish and has a cool accent. What explanation did you expect Jimmy to give? Was this satisfying or disappointing? Tell me." Jimmy continued, "I attacked Drew because someone paid me to. Someone who has a vested interest in making sure Drew McIntyre does not become WWE champion approached me with an offer I couldn't refuse. And I took it." The interviewer's eyes widened. "Wait, someone paid you to attack Drew? Who?" Jimmy smiled cryptically. "That's for me to know and for everyone else to figure out. But I'll give you a hint, it's someone who benefits from Drew being unable to compete. Someone who wants to make sure the WWE Championship picture remains in their favor." And with that, Jimmy walked away, leaving everyone with more questions than answers. Jimmy's revelation that someone paid him to attack Drew opened up a Pandora's box of conspiracy theories and speculation. Who would benefit from Drew being unable to compete for the WWE Championship? Cody Rhodes. The most obvious suspect is Cody Rhodes himself. If Cody hired Jimmy to take out Drew, it would guarantee Cody retains his championship without having to face one of his toughest challengers. This would be a massive heel turn for Cody and would fundamentally change his character. But would WWE really turn Cody heel right now when he's one of their most popular babyfaces? It seems unlikely but not impossible. Roman Reigns. Even though Roman is not currently holding the WWE Championship, he might want to ensure Drew doesn't win it because a Drew Championship reign could threaten Roman's position or the Bloodline's influence over SmackDown. Roman has a history of manipulating Jimmy and other family members to do his bidding. This would fit Roman's character perfectly. Someone outside SmackDown. What if someone from Raw or even outside WWE hired Jimmy to attack Drew? What if this is part of a larger scheme to destabilize SmackDown's championship picture? This seems far-fetched, but WWE has done cross-brand conspiracies before. Who do you think hired Jimmy to attack Drew? Give me your best detective work in the comments. Jimmy is lying. Maybe nobody hired Jimmy and he's claiming someone did to deflect responsibility for his actions. Maybe Jimmy attacked Drew for personal reasons and is now trying to create confusion by suggesting there's a conspiracy. This would be classic heel behavior, creating chaos and then lying about motivations to avoid consequences. After the show, reports emerged that WWE was conducting an internal investigation into why security took so long to respond to Drew's attack. According to backstage sources, security personnel claimed they were told to let it play out by a WWE producer because it would make for good television. If that's true, it's absolutely unacceptable. You can't prioritize good television over wrestler safety. Drew could have been permanently injured because WWE wanted dramatic footage. The security delay raises serious questions about WWE's priorities and their duty of care to their performers. Wrestlers are employees who deserve protection from violence, not content creators whose suffering is exploited for ratings. Wrestling has always blurred the lines between reality and fiction, but there should be limits to how far that blur goes. Allowing a legitimate assault to continue uninterrupted for 5 minutes because it makes good television crosses those limits. WWE needs to be held accountable for this decision if it's true that security was told to delay their response. Do you think WWE prioritizes entertainment value over wrestlers' safety? This incident suggests they might. Tell me your opinion. Cody Rhodes found himself in an incredibly difficult position after this attack. As WWE Champion and Drew's scheduled opponent, Cody had to balance several competing concerns: competitive integrity. Cody wants to face Drew at 100% and win because he's the better wrestler, not because Drew was injured in an attack. If Cody faces an injured Drew and wins, the victory is tainted. Championship defense. Cody has a contractual obligation to defend his championship. WWE expects him to compete regardless of his opponent's condition. If Drew can't compete, Cody will face someone else, but it won't be the match that was built up and promoted. Personal friendship. Reports suggest Cody and Drew are genuinely friends outside of wrestling. Cody has to be concerned about Drew's health and recovery as a friend, not just as an opponent. Cody addressed these concerns in a backstage promo later in the show. "Drew, I hope you're okay. I hope the injuries aren't as serious as they looked. I want to face you at your best, not after you've been brutally attacked. But if you can't compete, I understand. Your health is more important than any championship match." It was a classy response from Cody that showed his character while also keeping storyline options open. As the SmackDown broadcast was ending, Nick Aldis made an announcement about the status of the WWE Championship match. Due to tonight's attack on Drew McIntyre, the status of the scheduled WWE Championship match is currently uncertain. Drew is undergoing medical evaluation and will need to be cleared by WWE's medical staff before he's allowed to compete. If Drew is cleared to compete, the match will proceed as scheduled. If Drew is not cleared, we will determine an alternative challenger for Cody Rhodes' championship. This announcement created massive uncertainty and speculation about what would happen next. Would Drew be cleared in time? If not, who would replace Drew as challenger? Would Jimmy face consequences for the attack? Would the person who hired Jimmy be revealed? All of these questions would need to be answered in the coming weeks, creating ongoing storylines and viewer interest. What would you do if you were Nick Aldis in this situation? Force Drew to compete injured? Find a replacement? Tell me. As always with major WWE moments, social media exploded with reactions, theories, and debates about Jimmy's attack on Drew. Twitter/X trending topics included hashtag Drew McIntyre, hashtag Jimmy USO, hashtag SmackDown, hashtag Who Paid Jimmy, hashtag Wrestler Safety. Fans had strong opinions. Jimmy USO is a coward for attacking Drew when he was getting medical treatment. Drew couldn't defend himself properly. I don't care if someone paid Jimmy, that doesn't make it okay. Jimmy should be fired for this. WWE's security response was pathetic. 5 minutes. Drew could have been killed. This is actually brilliant storytelling. I'm so invested in finding out who hired Jimmy. Wrestling journalists immediately published articles. Who paid Jimmy USO? 5 suspects analyze Drew McIntyre's injury status. What we know: WWE security failure. Should there be consequences? The attack was getting exactly the reaction WWE wanted: massive conversation and debate that would drive viewership for next week's SmackDown. Some fans and legal analysts raised important questions about whether Jimmy's attack crossed from wrestling storyline into actual criminal behavior. If this attack was unscripted, and let's be clear, it almost certainly was scripted, Jimmy USO could theoretically face assault charges, battery charges, charges related to using weapons. Even though wrestling is predetermined, there are limits to what's legally acceptable. You can't just claim it's part of the show and avoid criminal liability for genuine assault. However, since this was almost certainly a scripted WWE storyline, despite being presented as real, there would be no actual criminal charges. Drew consented to the attack as part of his employment with WWE, but the story is presenting this as legitimate assault, which raises interesting questions about WWE's legal liability for allowing workplace violence even in a scripted context. Should wrestling companies face legal consequences for scripting dangerous attacks between employees? It's a fascinating question without easy answers. This attack is part of a long wrestling tradition of backstage assaults that blur the lines between storyline and reality. Stone Cold Steve Austin was famously run over in a parking lot. The Rock was attacked backstage multiple times during the Attitude Era. Seth Rollins attacked Edge in the Performance Center. Brock Lesnar destroyed Rey Mysterio's family backstage. These moments work because they feel more real than in-ring action. When attacks happen backstage in uncontrolled environments, audiences suspend disbelief more easily. But there's a difference between those historical attacks and this one. Jimmy's attack was prolonged and security's delay was explicitly part of the story. That makes the attack feel more dangerous and more negligent from WWE's perspective. Provided daily medical updates on Drew's condition, each one slightly more optimistic than the last, building hope that Drew might be cleared to compete. This storyline raises genuine moral questions about professional wrestling. Is it ethical to present workplace violence as entertainment? Wrestling has always featured violence, but there's something particularly disturbing about presenting backstage violence, as opposed to in-ring competition, as entertainment. Should WWE glorify attacks on vulnerable victims? Drew was receiving medical treatment when attacked. He couldn't defend himself properly. Is it appropriate to present that as heroic or justified behavior from Jimmy? Where's the line between storytelling and dangerous precedent? If young fans watch this and think attacking someone when they're vulnerable is cool, that's a problem. WWE has a responsibility to think about the messages they send. These aren't easy questions and reasonable people can disagree about the answers, but they're questions worth asking. What are your thoughts on the ethics of this kind of violent storytelling? Tell me in the comments. One positive aspect of this storyline is how it showcases Drew McIntyre's toughness and resilience. Despite being brutally attacked and seriously injured, Drew is determined to compete in his WWE Championship match. Drew isn't backing down or asking for sympathy, he's using this attack as motivation to prove he can overcome adversity. That's a powerful message. No matter what obstacles are thrown at you, you can persevere through determination and willpower. Drew's character has always been about overcoming challenges. From being fired from WWE, to rebuilding his career on the independent scene, to returning to WWE and finally getting championship opportunities, Drew's entire story is about resilience. This attack is just another chapter in that story. And if Drew does compete and win the championship despite his injuries, it will be one of the most satisfying payoffs in recent wrestling memory. Jimmy USO's backstage attack on Drew McIntyre was one of the most brutal and controversial segments in recent SmackDown history. It was effective storytelling that generated massive conversation and viewer interest, but it also raised legitimate questions about wrestler safety, security protocols, and the ethics of presenting graphic violence as entertainment. The attack set up multiple compelling storylines. Drew's quest for revenge against Jimmy. The mystery of who hired Jimmy. Drew's championship match status. Cody's role as both opponent and concerned colleague. WWE security failures. All of these threads will play out in the coming weeks, keeping fans engaged and invested in SmackDown's programming. Whether you loved this segment or hated it, you can't deny it made an impact and will be remembered as a defining moment in this era of WWE. Smash that like button if you want Drew to get brutal revenge on Jimmy USO. Subscribe to Wrestling Newsletter for continued coverage of this explosive storyline. Turn on notifications so you don't miss our analysis of next week's SmackDown. This is Wrestling Newsletter, and I'll see you in the next video as we continue following Drew McIntyre's quest for justice and the WWE Championship.